So in saying that, I guess we should introduce ourselves. So as I said, Ro and I are leading this webinar today, and we've come to do this really as working together with two other colleagues from the Research Schools Network, where we put together a three-day training programme using the Improving Behaviour in Schools guidance aimed at senior leadership teams. And as part of that, we want to do give some opportunities to explore the guidance further with people so that they can begin to look at how they want to use that to implement that within their own schools. So my name's Siobhan Haddleton. I work at Billesley Primary School and I'm the leader there of our autism resource base. I'm also an expert teacher for the Elliott Foundation, which means that I go in and support colleagues and other schools across our network of schools in England. And I've worked both in primary mainstream and specialist provisions for children with SEMH diagnoses, and also worked in some more specialist settings for secondary as well. Ro, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ro King with a slightly more COVID haircut than my photograph on the screen. I've worked at Greenshaw for my working life, from NQT up to SLT, which is where I still am. My specialisms are safeguarding, Senko, pupil premium. I'm currently on a sabbatical to do a master's, particularly in SEND, and I'm just working for the research school. So doing a lot of reading this year. Back to you, Shiv.
Thanks. Okay, then, so an overview of what we're hoping to do today. So we'll briefly introduce research schools and what we do for those of you who aren't aware. I'm hoping as well with your welcome email, Asima attached a short video. So that's a good starting point to if you're not quite sure what research schools are about, but we'll briefly touch on that. Then Ro's going to lead a quick reflection of behaviour in provision in your own school currently. And that's where we'd like to direct you to the chat facility where you can share positive things that are happening in your provision and also perhaps some things that you'd like to work on and improve. Then we're going to have a look at the EEF guidance report, and we'll delve into the 6 recommendations and have a look at those. And hopefully around 11:30, we should be ready to hand over to you for a quick break. And there are some directions there of different things that you can do during your time if you don't want to slip off and have a quick coffee. At 12 o'clock prompt, we will be back, and Carl Rogerson, who is the principal at Billesley and my boss, will be leading our Q&A session where we'll be discussing some of the points you've brought up in the chat, hopefully answering some questions and sharing some good practice that's happening in and across the schools that are attending today. So that's an overview for what will be happening. So to begin then, just a quick introduction to the Research School Network. As you can see, it runs across the whole of England and is a collection of now 39 schools in total. And we work together and actively engage in research, taking part in studies ourselves, and also sharing studies and best practice with other schools in and around our local areas. And that's using evidence collated by the EEF and then put together in their guidance reports. There are many different reports out there and you can access all of those online for free. Some of the latest ones explain and go into the research findings into SEND provision, social and emotional learning, metacognition, and working with parents. And again, that's just a few of what's been published. So if you're interested, if you look at the EEF website, you'll be able to access all of those and download them as PDFs for free. So within school, as a research school, we use the 3 fields of knowledge cycle that have been put together by the National College for School Leadership. And we use this to improve and evaluate our own provision to ensure that we're giving our children the best possible deal that they can get in terms of their education. So we look at what is out there already. So that's where the EEF really comes in. We look at what their research is and what best practice is out there. We also take what our own practitioners know, our own knowledge, our own experiences within our own provision. And we work collaboratively with other research schools, with other schools within our foundation trust, and within our own setting and our own colleagues to collaborate and inquire and improve and try out new kind of ways of delivering things through systematic and rigorous procedures. And then we evaluate those and feed that into our cycle, feed it back into our research schools network so that we can share what we're doing and how it's improved our practice. So I'm going to hand over to Ro then to talk about why we're looking at improving behaviour today.
So behaviour, it makes a large contribution, doesn't it? I don't think if I was going to place different concepts into a basket and say something is more important than something else, I don't think I could say behaviour is more important than curriculum or more important than teaching and learning, but it certainly plays a crucial part. And if you haven't got the behaviour right, then actually how can the teaching and learning be right? So it is crucial. It's one of the balls that we have to juggle to keep it in the air. And actually, if we think back to why behaviour needs to be good, I know it sounds like kind of a really obvious thing, but I think it is the place to start. And you have to think about safety. And we also have to think about our current world climate. So within the COVID world, we are all right now planning how to get children back into the classroom in a very, very different way. So I would imagine a lot of you are rewriting behaviour policies or writing amendments to them or additions to them, because we're going to have to change things, certainly in the short to medium term. And we need to think really carefully about how we do that and how we implement that. And so safety first, absolutely. That's why we need good behaviour. And then also we need, obviously, children learning effectively. And then we need our staff to want to work for us, and we need to retain them. So lots of really key reasons why behaviour is very, very important, but it's also very polarising. In a pre-COVID world, the Twitter was alive, wasn't it, with ban the booths, which is why I put the logo on there, just to be contentious, really. And that debate got so polarising, didn't it? And social media and the media in general really, really enjoys living at a polarity of a debate. And I'm going to suggest to you that's not a good place to be unless you are bolstered by research and evidence. If you have reasons for saying, well, actually, I think it's this because, and I'm not going to sit here and say whether I think isolation is a good idea or a bad idea, because it's all to do with how it's implemented, which we'll come on to later. Done badly, it's bad. Done well, it works for some. So you have to really, really consider your context, and you have to really consider how you do it. Thinking about research and evidence, I've put, again, pre-COVID world, and a headline, from the test about Big Brother's watching. So this is a school in Wandsworth who decided they were going to use police body cameras on some of their staff, not all, but I think probably like the on-call staff that were going around. That's really interesting because there's lots of psychological research going back to the 70s that says that if you feel you're being watched, you will make better pro-social choices. So it kind of should work. But then there's also over 70 empirical studies on the police wearing body cams that show that there's no statistical significant difference in the way that either the police or the citizens react in terms of their behaviour. So it's very, very interesting that schools have decided to take them in. Will it work? I don't know. Let's watch. Let's keep an eye. But what I'm saying is there is some research behind that as to why the school have made that decision. Shiv, if you could cycle on, please. So I suppose what I would like you to do now to start off with is to use the chat function on the right hand side there. It's about to get swamped, I know, and that's fine. What we'll do is we'll record it. So what I'll ask you to do is to put down some positives, what's going well, and it might be something that you've done in the school that's made a difference, but in terms of behaviour, So you can start writing them as soon as you like. I think what I'm after really are the things that you have control over. So you could say, my demographic behave well, so therefore, you know, its behaviour is easy for me in my school. But that's not really something that we can change. The idea here is to try and get some nuggets that maybe we can share as a network after the webinar. So things that you've done, maybe systems that you've implemented. It might be that you have an off-the-shelf package, although they come with their warnings, and hopefully you've done your research before you've used one of those. But just if you use the chat box there, just to pop down any positives. And you can keep doing that as we're talking. Shiv, next one, please. And the other thing is the issues. So again, please use the chat box. Why are you here? I doubt it's that you're bored, because there's a lot for us to do at the moment as teachers. But you must be here because you think that there's something that's not quite right. There's something that needs tweaking within your school to do with behaviour. So what are your issues? So again, if you populate that in the chat box on the right, it might be helpful if you put positive or issue before you start writing, and you can keep just populating that as I continue on. And here you might add some things that are maybe slightly outside of your locus of control. So it could be that you have particularly difficult parents. It could be that your demographic's quite high pupil premium. Anything like that, you can add them into the comment box on the right hand side. The idea being we'll try and compile them. Sorry, something came up on my computer. Good timing. We'll compile them kind of afterwards and share them. So you can keep writing on that as I keep going. So to the guidance report then, and recommendations. Now, in terms of how these get compiled, the EEF undertake, first of all, a scoping exercise. So they will go into schools, they will talk to head teachers and talk to professionals and say, okay, so behaviour, it's a big topic. What is it that you think needs to change? What do we need to focus on? Where do we need to look? And in terms of the behaviour guidance report, they came out with 3 different areas, which were what's the international evidence on why children and young people misbehave, what are classroom-based approaches to behaviour, and what are school-wide approaches to behaviour. So once they've got the idea of where to focus, they then turn over to the academics, who will undertake a literature review and will have a look at the international evidence in those areas, and then hand all of that back to the EEF, who will then put it into a package really that makes it palatable for us to look at. And so we have this beautiful little poster here of improving behaviour in schools with 6 different recommendations. They're split into 3 sections, you'll notice. You've got 1 to 4 there are your proactive recommendations, which Siobhan's going to take you through in a moment. 5 is described as reactive, and 6 is all to do with implementation. Now, I'm going to talk to you a bit more later on about the reactive, but I think it's just important to preface anything that we do at this point with what the intention of this is and what the intention is not. So within that recommendation 5 sit the most difficult and the most vulnerable pupils at our schools. That's where things have gone wrong and keep going wrong and persistently go wrong. You can't sit anywhere within a school and think, I have to create something that's going to cater for those handful, you know, a 5%, hopefully it's not 5%, but, you know, a 2% of pupils. We have to do things differently for them. And that's where number 5 sits. So if I ask you to kind of in your head almost kind of put to one side the most challenging and think about kind of actually the vast majority. If we get the vast majority working and acting and behaving in a certain way, then actually we hope that some of those 2 to 5% will also get pulled along with them. But I don't want you to sit there and thinking this isn't going to work for Tommy who does this, that and the other. Think about the vast majority. So I'm going to hand over to Shiv to talk about 1 through to 4.
Okay, thank you, Ro. So as Ro pointed out, the first 4 are the proactive strategies. And just to reiterate, these are school-wide focus strategies that should reduce efforts expended in reacting to poor behaviour for the majority of your students. So we're going to have a look at the first two, and then I'm going to again point you towards the chat to share some of your thoughts, your ideas, some good practice that's happening within those. Then we'll have a further look at 3 and 4, and then we'll go back to Ro to have a look at 5, and then how we implement changes within our schools. So the first strategy then is all about knowing and understanding your pupils and their influences. And this is the largest strategy within the guidance report. And its focus is on how to build those relationships, and the importance really of doing that, of knowing and understanding your pupils, both as a cohort, as a year group, as a class, and as individuals, to understand their circumstances and to really understand about how this might affect their behaviour. So within each of the strategies, it looks at different ways that we as practitioners, we as people who are working in schools, can do that. So one of the main ideas and suggestions around this is to use an establish, maintain and review model. And that explores ways of how school staff can establish those relationships with pupils, how to continue to maintain them, and then how to repair them when necessary following an incident which happens at school. And the importance of having done the establish and the maintaining to enable you to do the repairing. So that's one of the main things that it looks at. It also looks at some simple quick fix strategies, if you like, such as the 2 to 10 method, which is aimed at all members of staff, and is a method where staff can really highlight those individual more vulnerable children, or children that perhaps they're struggling to establish a relationship with, and gives them a tactic to do that. So with 2 to 10 becomes 2 minutes every day for 10 consecutive days. And that's 2 minutes of conversation that you have with that individual pupil that's not academic based, that's not school focused, but is all about getting to know them on a level that's not within how well they're doing in their lessons, a more personal level, if you like. And this has been found a really effective way for all staff across settings to establish those relationships. And that's one of the main key focuses in this proactive strategy. The second strategy is all about teaching learning behaviours and using that alongside managing misbehaviour. And I think going on from Ro's point about the new world that we find ourselves in with COVID-19 and thinking about our provision at school, this has also become really key for us, because teaching children those behaviours on how to learn has definitely helped and improved their engagement with their learning outside of the classroom and in their home learning environment. But within a school setting, we've also seen that teaching these learning behaviours can really improve the behaviour in a whole class. So this focuses on the learning framework that was put together from Powell and Todd, and Ellis and Todd have adapted that from 2018. And it considers all relationships of influence within teaching a learning behaviour. So that's the child's relationship with themselves, their relationship with the others in their peer group, in their class learning environment, and with their curriculum and the curriculum that we're providing them as school. And I'm going to point you as well at this point for this strategy towards the SEL guidance that they've also published. So that will also support in terms of teaching children their learning behaviours, but also those social and emotional learning strategies that they need to. So at this point, I'd like you, I can't see the chat, I'm afraid, so I'm not quite sure what's happening on it, but I'd like you to invite you, hopefully you've finished with all your good and bad points that you've been putting on there. But if you'd like to share some good practice that's happening within these two strategies in your own school, that would be great. So how are you getting to know and understand your pupils and what influences them? And do you have any specific strategies or ways in which you teach learning behaviours to your pupils in your setting? Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to point you in the direction of strategy number 3. And this is the one that looks at classroom management strategies and how we support good behaviour. So we know in the UK that positive reward systems, house points, stickers, team points, tokens, marbles in a jar are really common in our classrooms. And there's a part in this strategy which looks at the evidence behind using those. And this is also where the EEF really look at some of those off-the-shelf products that Ro mentioned, 2 of which, the Incredible Years programme and also the Good Behaviour game, are analysed, and there are also further findings that the EEF have discovered when they've looked into those available online if you're interested in looking at off-the-shelf products and how to implement them successfully in your own schools. Alongside this, it also looks at classroom management strategies. And I know that a lot of my work when I go into support in other schools and within my own school is all about looking at how to support teachers, TAs, lunchtime supervisors, SLT in terms of classroom management and those strategies. And alongside what the EEF say, our most successful implementation of this has been where we've worked with either specific year groups where there have been difficulties highlighted, or with individual members of staff over a sustained period of time with a thought through and carefully implemented plan, from giving the staff an option of self-reflection, try new approaches with coaching and mentoring, and then a review of the progress that's been made. So giving those staff real ownership over developing their own skills, as opposed to just rolling out whole school CPD to try and improve our classroom management. And the final proactive strategy are the simple approaches. Some of you may have seen the greetings at the door viral clips that have kind of been around on the internet for quite a while now. Every teacher giving each child a different handshake. And these simple techniques, there is research behind them. And this part of the guidance report looks at those. So whether it is positive greetings at the door and implementing that as part of your behaviour policy, or whether it's the 5-to-1 ratio. So with every 6 comments that you give a child, 5 of them are positive, 1 of them is about improving. That's where this is looked at within the report. It also looks into the Magic Breakfast research, which is some very interesting reading and about the effects that the Magic Breakfast has and why. And there's also a short part about working with parents in this segment as well. Again, I'd also direct you, if that's something that you're interested to, into further reading and a guidance report, which is specifically around working with parents from a school setting. So that kind of summarises very briefly those 4 proactive strategies. I'm going to head back to Ro now to have a look at the 5th one. And as we've mentioned before, if you'd like to share any of your good practice on the chat, that would be fantastic. Thanks, Ro.
Thank you. So first of all, to clarify what we mean by reactive strategies. This isn't if something goes wrong at that moment in the classroom, how the teacher responds. It is not that. It's still strategic. It's still something's going wrong over a period of time with a student. So how do we react to that? What is our plan of action? What is our strategy there? You should really, through proactive 1 through to 4, have covered classroom management to a degree where your teachers should know and understand what they do if something goes wrong there and then in a classroom. So within the guidance report, which it is really helpful to look at it as well because of the specifics that it has within it. Page 29, it talks about a couple of different program types which have positive outcomes. These are targeted approaches, obviously, in order to be able to turn around a child's behaviour where it's got very, very ingrained. It takes time and patience and has to be really, really specific to the individual. When I first read this guidance report and I saw one of these program types with a positive outcome, I thought, yeah, I do that. Daily report cards. Yeah, we do that. But actually, when I really, really considered it, I wondered whether we did it in the right way, in a personalised enough way. So I'm a secondary school, we're nearly at 2,000 students now, and a few of them are on daily report cards. And so what do? We systematise it. We have a bunch that are printed off. We have a set of generic targets that might be things along the lines of do not disrupt learning, do as asked first time. But actually, and we choose the top 3 from them, because 3 is a magic number. We all know that. And we put them on the report card and we send the students on their way. But I suppose my challenge with that is that personalised enough? Is that tailored enough? I mean, Tommy is going to be better in one subject than another subject. We need to go much more specific on that. Which brings me to the second programme type that they just talk about in the guidance report, which they term a functional behavioural assessment. Okay, what's that? So actually, strip it back. It's when you get the people who know the child the best, including the child, maybe around the table at the same time, but maybe it's just an information or assessment gathering phase, if you like. So you get information from the teachers, you get information from the parents, bit from the child, if they have any other agencies working with them. And suddenly it sounds like a TAC meeting, a team around a child meeting, or it sounds like a CAF form, a common assessment framework tool. Well, yes, because these things have been put in place because there's research and evidence behind the fact that the slow evidence gather and assessment, trying to work out what the triggers are in a young person, there's evidence that that is successful, but it's only successful when it's done well. And things like, say, the CAF form, certainly in my borough, got slightly adulterated, shall we say, because it got used as a pathway tool. So fill out a CAF and you can gain access to this agency or this resource or that. And so it got reduced down. And so it didn't get completed properly. It didn't get enough adults contributing to it. And all of a sudden it doesn't work. And then you're going, oh, well, that doesn't work. But again, it's the same as with the daily report card. If you have a true functional assessment of a child, and you could use, so we use our educational psychologist to be the linchpin in the middle of this. They will meet with the teachers as a group and have a teacher forum. They'll meet with the parents individually, meet with the child, meet with anybody else, and then obviously come to a formulation about what the triggers are and what's going on for that child. And then come up with some very, very specific strategies, which, hey presto, you could then pop onto your daily report card, but very, very tailored. And I think it's very easy sometimes with some of the EEF guidance reports to look at the recommendations and go, well, I'm doing that. But you have to take the time to sit back and reflect and go, am I truly doing that? Am I doing that to the best that I can do? Shiv's already mentioned kind of some other guidance reports that are helpful, and I would suggest that there is a few others as well. So if you haven't had a look at them, metacognition and self-regulation in learning, and you've got working with parents to support children. Those two are really crucial, particularly in our COVID world that we find ourselves in, because I don't know if your children are anything like my 3 children who are currently quite deregulated, and as I say, tantruming in the kitchen, then it's all, you know, it's very, very difficult to keep them on board. And we're going to have quite a job, and I pity the teachers who have my children. We're going to have quite a job when they go back to school of getting them back on track. So those 2 guidance reports I must recommend to you as well. And there's one more on the next slide there, Shiv, which is the key guidance report, if I'm going to say so, which is implementation, because it is all about how you do something with any of these things. And the top takeaway from that is we've got to do less and we do them better. So we're teachers, we like working hard. So every September, it's a new school year, let's have 12 things on our to-do list. Show it to governors and they'll think we're working really hard and doing great things. I think you have to have the confidence to say, I'm going to do 2 things. It might take 3 years to get it right. But you have to train and teach your governors and your staff in the fact that things will take longer. It is time consuming, it is patient work. But you will get better results if you take more time over it and do it well. Which takes it to the second point there about increasing impact with rigorous planning. On the next slide, it's got that was a cue there, thanks, Shiv. It's got in the appendix, Appendix 2 is an example of a logic model, which the EEF use for any kind of implementation. So we would guide you through this. Shiv talked at the beginning about a 3-day course model that we run, which hopefully will run again when we can all, see each other face to face. And this is where we would take you through the guidance in more depth, because we're literally just skimming the surface with you today to give a taste. But we'd take you through particularly this logic model. Now, this planning is rigorous. This is for a whole academic year's intervention. It's quite a complex change, and so it required a lot of thinking about. But I would commend to you that before you make any change, anything different in your school, you have this logic model process of how you think about how you're going to implement something. You need to think about, you need to do a pre-mortem, of what could go wrong if. And all of this is the last recommendation about implementation, which is consistency. And I had a little look down the chat bar as Shiv was talking earlier, and consistency came up interestingly on both sides. So people were saying it's positive because we've got consistency, and then other people were going, but it's awful because we don't have consistency. And so that is a real key thing. And actually on the next slide, you've got we don't do everything for Ofsted, but they gathered some data, a little bit old now, but and under the old framework, but nonetheless gives us a really good indicator of this. Over 3 months, 95 Ofsted reports, they looked at them and found that the biggest flaw in our schools, the biggest area for improvement, was consistency. It's labelled it behaviour management. That's old money. We'd probably talk about classroom management now, but it's got that word consistency. Is what we're not very good at doing in schools, because we think we have to keep moving and keep changing and have new ideas and different ideas. And actually, we just need to do what we're doing, but a lot better. So I can't really tell you all about the implementation guidance report, but what I am going to do is we're going to take a little break. And on the next slide, I am directing you towards really having a little look at the EEF's Guide to Implementation. It's an online course. It's got lots of little short videos. What we'll do is we'll pop the link to it in the chat bar, so you can just click on that and it will take you through it. So you can spend your time, your 24 minutes between now and midday getting a coffee or going to the loo, or I would actually recommend just having a little look at that online course, because as I say, implementation is kind of a key thing that if it's done really well, then actually that makes all the difference. We're going to ask you if you've got any questions. Again, now's the time to use the chat function, because what we'll do is we'll gather them up in the next couple of minutes. We'll take them away. And okay, so there's the link that's just arrived there. But if you have any questions, can you just log them in the chat bar in the next 2 minutes? We'll take them away, have a think about how to answer them, and come back and talk to you at midday about that. What you could choose to do is you could choose to stay in this room maybe and use the chat bar to talk to other delegates. If you like, it could get a little busy because it's quite busy in the room. But we're going to leave you now for about 20 minutes. Please do have a little look at that online course, and we'll see you again at midday. Okay. And remember, any questions, please just pop them in the chat box there, and we'll gather them up in the next couple of minutes.
Okay.
Yep, I'm going to leave this one now, and we'll come back to it in a bit.
Okay. See you
all. Right, I'll see you at 12 o'clock.